So I moved into a duplex with my ex about 3 years ago in what we thought was a safer part of the city. One of our neighbors, Amber, works in the duplex rental office, and her husband, Ed, was at the time fresh out of prison. Later, would see all the swastika tattoos. And he had been doing and continues to do landscape work for the rentals, like mow the lawns, cut down trees, etc. Other than that, he is home mostly doing odd and end jobs, like tinkering with his mower or truck or something. They both are super nice people, very kind and loving towards others, and always offers to help out. We have smoked weed together a few times. Ed smokes more than Amber, and have talked about all kinds of things, so I thought I could trust them and felt very safe being their neighbor. I once mentioned how sometimes when I'm home alone, I hear steps in the attic over my room and what sounds like a chair being dragged. How sometimes the noise follows me around the house and always freaks me out to the point of calling someone just to feel a little safer until the noises die down. Ed said, "What, you think we're spying on you?" in a laughing way. But it creeped me out a little. So then I break up with my boyfriend and he moves out. This is recent, so a few months ago. Ed started texting me asking if I wanted to smoke while Amber was still at work. I declined every time, finding different excuses because I still felt uncomfortable around him. Then he asked if I wanted to have sex with him because he thinks Amber is cheating on him. I definitely shut that down, and it was awkward as fuck. I didn't tell Amber because I didn't want to get kicked out or have some horrible awkward tension, and I hate confrontation, so I kept quiet. That's when I start to hear things in the attic above my room more often. It freaked me out even more when I woke up to a loud bang outside my front door at 3:40 a.m. When I went to examine it, there was a small lockpick outside my door on the ground, but no one was around. I kept the lockpick, and the next day I texted a picture of it to Amber to let her know I thought someone was creeping around, and she said, "Oh, that's Ed. That's his ice pick. Not a lockpick, sweetie. No one can pick your deadbolt with that. But I know the difference in a 4-inch skinny ass lockpick and an ice pick." I'm so scared to be alone here, especially at night. Our attics connect, and it's not outlandish to think he could be up there spying on me. I even found a freshly drilled hole in the ceiling in my room. I just put wadded up paper in it and try not to think of it. I honestly hope nothing comes of it, and I'm just being paranoid. For everyone saying to call the police, I really have no evidence. I have the lockpick still and pictures of my door being messed with. But when I've gone into the attic, it's been completely empty. I've never gone in alone because its opening is in my garage and there is no ladder, so it requires 2 people. But as of now, it is a gaping hole above my washer and dryer and very hard to get into without good upper body strength. I'd call my ex to come home when the dragging would start, and by the time he got there, it'd be cleared out, so I'm hesitant to report anything with no evidence. This is 100% true. I'm staying with my boyfriend until I move out in a few weeks, despite my neighbors being upset I'm leaving. To address the other thing, I didn't see any swastika tattoos until months after I had been hanging out on their back porch to smoke with them. He had his shirt off for the first time, and there was about 3 on his body. Confused me because Amber and Ed are super Wiccan. She has Wicca tattoos all over and stuff, and so I believe maybe his tattoos were for protection in prison. Either way, after that, I stopped hanging out with them and would only speak to them if we were both outside at the same time. This took place 20 years ago when I was 12 years old. Almost all of the details were kept from me at the time due to my age, so I didn't find out until much later what actually really took place. My mother, understandably, still doesn't really like talking about any of this. as it was a really traumatic experience. It's only with hindsight that I've realized how genuinely creepy and horrific this whole situation was. In early 2000, I had just started high school. We lived a little way from school, so my mother used to drop me off in the mornings and pick me up in the afternoons. On February 15th that year, I headed to meet my mom at the usual pickup point across the road from my school, but I was surprised to find my grandmother waiting for me there instead. My grandmother told me that my mom wasn't able to pick me up, so I went with her and we picked my brother up from his primary school. My sisters were both away on school trips. We went back to our grandparents' house, and my nana and my grandfather sat us down to tell us that something terrible had happened. Our mom's close friend, Vivian, had died the previous day. They didn't go into any details other than Mom was obviously extremely upset. We were upset too. Vivian was a lovely lady, and we had spent a lot of time at her house over the years, not only because Vivian and my mom were close, but also because Vivian's husband, Andrew, was my brother's Cub Scout leader, and one of their sons was my brother's friend. At that age, nobody I knew had ever died, so it was quite difficult to process what happened. We'd only just seen her the previous weekend. From my perspective as a naive 12-year-old, the following days passed mostly without incident, apart from my mother's obvious sadness. In hindsight, there was also an air of disquiet around her, but I didn't really clock it at the time. Around 2 weeks after Vivian's death, I was at home with my mother and brother, while my stepfather, a barrister, was out for dinner with a client. It was early evening, perhaps 7 p.m., and I believe my older sister was at her boyfriend's house, while my younger sister was at basketball practice. Our house had a large open floor plan, L-shaped room which encompassed the kitchen, living room, and dining room areas. My brother was playing in his bedroom, while I was sitting on the couch watching TV in the living room area with my mom. From the vantage point, I had a clear view of the front door. The security light on our front porch flickered on, and there was a knock at the door. My mother got up to answer it, and she opened the door, and she took a step backwards and visibly stiffened. Vivian's husband, Andrew, was standing on our porch asking to see my stepfather. I remember my mom explaining that my stepdad wasn't available to talk at the moment, and that if Andrew needed to speak with him, then it would be better to leave a message. Andrew clearly realized my stepdad wasn't home and insisted on waiting for him. My mom repeated that it would be better to call another time, but he easily sidestepped her into the house and strode into the living room area. I can still picture my mother's forced cheeriness and frozen smile as he sat down on the couch opposite mine and asked for a cup of tea while he waited. Mom, still with that strange smile plastered to her face, asked me to make tea while she told V's husband that she'd call to find out what time my stepdad would be home. I made tea for all three of us and sat back down on the couch, making awkward small talk with him, while my mom repeatedly dialed my stepdad's mobile number, but he wasn't answering. Andrew was talking to me, but I remember thinking it was rude that he didn't seem to be paying much attention to what I was saying. His eyes were constantly flickering over to my mom, who was standing at the phone in the kitchen and around 5 meters away from us. The whole thing felt very weird to me. She eventually got through to my stepdad and, still smiling, said something along the lines of, "Darling, Andrew is here." "Yes, here in the living room." "Yes, yes. He said he's waiting for you. You won't be long, will you?" My stepdad was home within 20 minutes and convinced Andrew to leave with promises that they could speak on the phone the following day. I found out years later that my mother, stepfather, and the rest of their friends, along with Vivian's parents and brothers, all strongly suspected that Andrew had murdered Vivian. My siblings and I didn't attend the funeral. My mom felt we were too young, I think, but later discovered that a police presence was needed at Vivian's funeral, which Andrew attended, because Vivian's brothers were so angry that there were concerns that they may assault Andrew, as they were convinced he had murdered her. That's how intensely people suspected him. My mom was utterly terrified when he showed up at the door that night, but had been desperately trying both not to antagonize him nor to frighten me. It transpired that he had been interviewed by police earlier that day, and it was clear that they were building a case against him. He wanted legal advice and potential representation from my stepfather, who refused. According to my mom, Vivian and Andrew had been having marital problems for a long time, and Vivian had confided in my mom and others that she had felt increasingly uncomfortable around him, and that his temper could be frightening for both her and their children. They were already sleeping in separate bedrooms, but he didn't seem to be accepting that the marriage was all but over. The previous weekend, she had told my mom and others that she was planning to officially leave him, and that she was going to be making it clear to him that it was over too. She was bludgeoned to death with a steel rod in her bedroom on Valentine's Day when she returned home from dropping her boys off at school, having supposedly interrupted a burglary, though the police immediately realized that this was obviously staged. The contents of the drawers from the bedside tables and the chest drawers had been emptied out into piles on the floor, but there was no indication that these piles had been sifted through. There were no signs of forced entry, and nothing was stolen. My mom and others believed she had potentially rejected some form of romantic gesture, and he had snapped. However, there was blood on the piles of drawer contents, yet no blood on the floor underneath. Suggests that the burglary may have been staged before she even returned from that morning. Andrew tried to cover up his crime by deliberately driving to a series of shops, obtaining receipts from small purchases, and making inquiries with cashiers to build an alibi. He also originally claimed that he had visited a large shopping mall on the day of the murder and walked around there for quite some time. But 2 weeks later, presumably when he realized that the police could check CCTV and find he wasn't there, he changed his story and said he'd actually been at a very popular local nature reserve, walking and reading a book. Conveniently, there's no CCTV in any part of that particular nature reserve, including the car park. He was not seen by any other walkers in the area. He had come to our house that evening after admitting earlier that day that he had initially lied about his whereabouts to the police. He was arrested soon after. Andrew had never admitted to the murder and was found guilty on circumstantial evidence. He was sentenced 21 years with a minimum term of 16 years, meaning he may already be out on parole. Can't find any information about that online. However, I don't want to ask my mom about it, as I don't want to drag up awful memories for her. Oh, and a few years later, Andrew also went through a phase of writing letters to my younger brother, who would have been around 11 to 12 years old at that stage, from prison, protesting his innocence. It was creepy as fuck. My mother's close friend was murdered by her own husband, who tried to cover it up as a burglary gone wrong. He showed up at our house and not long before his arrest. I want to apologize for any grammar language mistakes. English isn't my first language, but I think my skill is good enough for you to understand. To really understand a story, or maybe how it happened, you need to know a few things. I live in Belgium, and at the time of the events, 2018, I lived at home with my parents, siblings, older brother and sister, and my sweet dog. Looking back now, maybe my dog is a bit too sweet. Also important to note is that my family is all over the place. Everybody is always busy doing something. Everyone has a very different rhythm, and some days we live next to each other instead of with each other. So that is why at the time I didn't really know who was home and who wasn't. We do love each other, In 2018, on a school night, I woke up at some noises in my room. I was confused and looked at my phone. It was around 3 a.m. You know that feeling when you wake up very abruptly and don't know if you're dreaming or awake? That was kind of how I felt. There's a street light right out the window, so even though the curtains were closed, I could still make out silhouettes and figures. As I had just woke up and wasn't really thinking, I thought the silhouette I saw in my room was my older brother. I was still drunk, as you could call it, and started asking him what he was doing. But he didn't really react. I saw him walking towards my jewelry. I asked him again what he was doing. Again, my brother didn't respond. I was still laying in bed and began to feel angry because I had school the next day and had to get up early. And as you do with irritating siblings, I started to curse him out. Opie, get the F out. I have school in the morning. Opie is a name of my brother. This time he looked at me, but again didn't say anything. He started to walk towards my handbag and started looking in it and taking things out. At this point, I was just angry at my brother and finally got out of bed. Mind you, the lights are still off. I walked towards him and asked him again, "What the fuck are you doing? Get out." And I physically started pushing him slightly towards the door. Then he spoke, "Where is the money? Where is the money?" In like this strange, almost fake accent. And seriously, I started laughing it off. I still thought it was my brother. Okay, I don't know if you're drunk or just being an asshole, but get out. By this time, we were almost at the door. I was still pushing him out. He left and I closed the door. Finally, I thought as I went back to bed, but I started feeling unsettled. I got nervous and scared and started thinking it over. Didn't I smell cigarettes? Opie doesn't smoke. Why would he act so strange? So just to be sure, I texted my brother. "Where are you?" He answered me. My heart sank to my knees. I just left the gym. Home in a minute. I immediately called him, frantically explaining there was just someone in my room. I started crying as I was panicking and asking him what to do. He said to call the police and stay in my room. As the gym was really close to our home, my brother came home like literally a minute or two later. I was still upstairs on the phone with the police while I heard my brother yell a whole lot of curse words and "get out." At that point, I was in the upstairs hallway because my sister woke up and was standing there too. My father fell asleep downstairs on the couch, so when he heard my brother scream, he immediately woke up and knew something was wrong. He went to the downstairs hallway and saw my brother chasing the intruder. At this point, they were already at the front door. My brother managed to take a backpack from the intruder, but sadly he got away and fled. My brother did not get a good look at him though. So the police came and I was actually in shock. All this time my mother was asleep because she's on strong sleep meds. She woke up during the chase when my sister and I were standing in the hallway. I was crying and she came up to us. I frantically told her what happened and she said, "Ah, little one, that was a very bad dream." That's one of the things we still laugh about today. While we were talking to the police, we had to describe the person. I told them exactly what had happened and how he looked. Due to the streetlight, I could see the clothes he was wearing. He had a hood on, so I didn't see his face. And when I was close, he always turned his back towards me. So I'm telling the police lady about his black pants and green hoodie. Then she abruptly stopped me. "Green? Your brother said light gray." That's the second time my heart dropped to my knees. There were two guys, not one. Both my brother and I were 100% sure about what we saw. So there had been two guys. They took a few iPads, phones, and wallets, but luckily my brother took the backpack where there was a lot more valuable things that they didn't get away with. But the burglars were kind of stupid because we still had Find My on all of our Apple devices, and they were still running. A day later, when we saw the location, my brother jumped in his car with my father while on the phone with the police. Really, my brother is just a badass. Going to the gym at night, he's in the military, chasing intruders through the house. I wouldn't fuck with him. They waited for the police and they went into the house where the location of our devices and found one guy. He was crying and covered in his own piss and puke. They arrested him and he confessed. He said he was high on drugs and it was the first time he ever did something like that. He was very panicky and crying the whole time. My brother recognized him as the intruder he chased, so that meant the guy who was in my room was still out there. The guy snitched on the other guy, but he was nowhere to be found. We all kinda got on with our lives, but I was really scarred. I slept with my lights on for more than a year, and every time I would be awake past 3 a.m., I couldn't go to sleep anymore. The intruder they caught went to jail for a year. He was a first-time offender and is now in a rehab program. He has sent us a letter or two with our consent, and we kind of feel bad for him. He was traumatized too, but half a year ago we heard the second man was taken into custody. I was finally over it. I mean, it wasn't as bad in the beginning, but of course I still got scared sometimes. But now they finally caught the man that was in my room. What we found out was unsettling by the least. While the dude that pissed himself didn't have a record because this happened, the dude who was in my room was a very experienced criminal. He had multiple possession charges, theft, drunk driving, and worst of all, assault and attempted homicide. The man I talked to that I cursed out and pushed out of my room at 3 a.m. was dangerous. So I'm very happy to be alive. The night this happened, I had been watching horror movies, so yeah, I was already on edge. Movie's over. It's 12 a.m., I'm spooked, and I head to bed. I'm trying my hardest not to look at the shadows in my room and just fall asleep, and eventually I do. And then I wake up. I hear something. I see something. I'm staring at the wall straight ahead of me, trying to figure out what I'm looking at. It's a shadow of a person. Okay, that's fine, I tell myself. My imagination always makes me see weird shit when I wake up in the middle of the night. But then I hear the noise again. It's scratching on the window behind me, and based on where the shadow on the wall is, it would be cast from the window behind me. But I'm on the second floor. How could... It's real. I jump straight up on my bed, and I'm wide awake and ready to go crazy. Now that I'm staring at the window, I can clearly see there's a silhouette of a person directly outside my window, concealed by the blinds. This dude is right up on my window, pressed against it, in a crouch position. We're 2 feet apart, separated by a window. Somehow, even after all those horror movies, my first thought doesn't go straight to paranormal, but instead to, okay, this dude is trying to break into my house through the window. So I bang on the window with a balled fist and yell, I called the cops, get the fuck out of here. Imagine my fucking surprise when the silhouette doesn't budge an inch. I'm stunned. I'm standing there staring at the silhouette and notice it slightly rocking back and forth, and the scratching noise is continuing. At this point, the burglar idea is thrown out the window. This is clearly paranormal. I'm going to die. I'm scared. Okay, calm down. I need to peek through the blinds to see what this is. Okay. And then I peeked. And outside on my window, on the balcony, is a dirty, sickly, scrawny woman wearing just a soiled hospital gown. She's hunched over, rocking back and forth, and scribbling on a piece of paper. I get it now. It's not paranormal. It's a zombie apocalypse. Nothing is too far-fetched at this point. I'm riding a roller coaster of emotion. All logic is gone. I knock on the window and I swear to God she does this classic zombie move where they stop and look up and their head cocked to one side. She holds this position for just a couple of seconds and then goes back to scribbling. What the fuck? I knock again. She walks like a damn goblin over to the door on the balcony that I can't quite remember if I locked it. She starts jiggling the door handle. It's locked, thank God. She gives up and goes back to scribbling. The good news is, I might as well be invisible to this creature. I'm watching her from a foot away through the blinds as she has no idea. The bad news is that there's a gremlin on my balcony. Time to actually call the cops. As I start the phone call, it must be her zombie intuition that kicks in and she scurries down the balcony stairs and off into the night. And that was it. What a rush. A high as a kite mental patient escapes and found their way onto my second floor balcony at 2 a.m. So I, a 25 female, recently visited family outside of state. We've all been really careful of corona stuff and only met as we believed an elderly family member was in her last days. She pulled through. While visiting, my aunt decided to have a mini kickback at her coworker's place. I was reluctant to go, but she assured us that he would only be there to let us in, and that she would sanitize things before we all came over. Fine, I guess. We get there, and the space where the get-together was some kind of split-level terrace situation attached to the back of the house. It was pretty cool, as he had color-changing lights all around and a kick-ass Native American mural painted on the windows so you couldn't see in or out to the backyard. There was also a full bar in one area to the side, large enough to service an actual establishment. The kickback begins, and while my aunts and uncles start dancing and drinking, I start to explore the room. I wander over to the side of the bar where there was a bookshelf. I love to read, and I love books, so it drew me in. As I'm checking out the books on the shelf, I noticed some pictures on the bottom shelf. My vision went totally out of focus for the first time in my life. I truly could not believe my eyes. At the bottom of the bookshelf was a framed picture of me from my high school homecoming dance. I was 15 at the time that picture was taken. I wasn't really sure how to manage the panic I was feeling, so I just decided to go to the side of the room and wait for the party to end. I was DD, so I couldn't just leave like I wanted to. I have never met this man in my life. I hadn't even seen him when we were in his house. I don't have a clue where he got the picture. Facebook maybe? Or why would he choose to keep it framed in his bar room? I don't think anyone else noticed, and I was far too mortified to say anything. I can't even let myself think what possessed him to print my picture. I was a pretty well-endowed teenager in a one-strap bodycon dress, so I have an idea. I just know that under no circumstances will I ever enter that house again. Hey guys, this is my first post in this subreddit, so figured I'd make it a good one. Also, I'm sorry in advance for any formatting issues. I don't really ever post, so I'm still learning. I'm a 25-year-old female, but this happened when I was 16. I got the awesome opportunity to go to China through this program I was a part of. I was so excited. One day while in China, we all go to the Beijing Mall. It was a group of 11 of us Americans and our tour guide. We were told to be back at the certain spot in 2 hours to get back to the van. I took my buddy, let's call her Abby, and we went walking around the mall about an hour into our awful bargaining. This tall Russian man approaches us. He asked where we were from. I said Canada, and we were there for holiday. I knew absolutely nothing about Canada, really, as a 16-year-old, so I was hoping he didn't ask any more questions. He makes more small talk, saying how Abby looks like Obama's daughter. Weird, I know. And Abby and I were clearly getting uncomfortable. We tell the man we have to go, and we turn around to walk away. This man grabs my arm and starts walking in the other direction, away from everyone. I was trying to get the attention of some locals, but they seemed like this was totally normal. He almost got me out of the mall, but luckily my tour guide and leader from the group was close to the exit and stopped what was going on. No authorities were called. The dude just walked away after he realized he wouldn't be getting me today. It just makes me wonder what the hell would have happened to me if I wasn't so lucky.